Do you have any particular examples that you can think of that made working in this field particularly meaningful to you?
Well, when I think of that, Paul, I really think in terms of bridge building. I see bridge building as being a very important aspect of the involvements of an engineer. And perhaps by way of example, to illustrate what I'm really getting at, I would mention the Forth Bridge. That's F-O-R-T-H, the Forth Bridge, named after the River Forth in Scotland, just a few miles from Edinburgh, the capital of Scotland. And the Forth Bridge was constructed in 1890. And at the time it was built, it was based on the cantilever structure. And the cantilever structure, of course, came from the Far East, where bridges were built of bamboo. When the Forth Bridge was being designed based on this cantilever structure, it was also the intention to use as a raw material steel. And there was great concern by the British government about using this, what was then called a new material. That was the terminology, a new material called steel, for a major structure that was proposed, like the Forth rail bridge. It was a train to carry train lines for a railway, the Forth rail bridge. Because a few years earlier, just a little bit north of the River Forth, is another river called the River Tay. And the Tay had a bridge built over it, built of cast iron. And unfortunately, on a Christmas night, in a heavy, heavy storm, a train going over that cast iron bridge, the bridge collapsed and the train went into the River Tay. Many lives were lost. So the government was very concerned. This accident that had happened a few years before, using a conventional material, cast iron, the proposal was now to build a bridge over the River Forth using steel, a new material. So they were very suspicious, very worried. So the designers concluded they would prepare a model, and they prepared a model and they put this on show at the Royal Society in London. I said the Royal Society, Royal Institute, the Royal Institute in London. And the model consisted of two men sitting on chairs. You've got to picture this. One man sitting in a chair with his arms outstretched up like a cantilever. And another gentleman a little bit away from him, his arms up outstretched like a cantilever. And suspended from each of their arms, their outer arms, there was a load of bricks to carry the load. And in the center between the two men, there was suspended on a small platform a Japanese gentleman. And the reason the Japanese gentleman was sitting in that suspended seat was to pay tribute to the fact that the concept for this bridge had come from the Far East. It was not something developed in Britain. The cantilever principle was knowledge that had been brought from abroad. And the Japanese gentleman sitting in that seat was a testimonial to that knowledge transfer process. Of course, the bridge indeed was built, and that steel bridge is still there today, and it still carries the main train line from London through Edinburgh, across the River Forth, and up north to Aberdeen. The bridge is still there. It's a great example of new technology, new materials, and collaboration involving knowledge transferred from different sources.
Definitely. you think of an example where models without measurement can be an issue?
Well, Paul, there's one that I have used in some of my lectures, not so much now, but back at the beginning of, I guess, between 2010 and 2015, 2016, a number of lectures I gave that I would use as an example, because if you recall, back in May 2010, there was an eruption of the volcano in Iceland. And of course, Iceland is noted for volcanic action. And back in May 2010, the volcano erupted there, and it resulted in closing of all the airports in Britain. But one in particular was Heathrow, the closing of Heathrow. The airports were closed by action of the Civil Aviation Authority. And it turned out subsequently that this was a mistake. It had been reported that the level of dangerous black ash, which comes from the volcano, of course, in the air over London was above a safe threshold. That was actually reported. The black ash is above a safe threshold. But when the Met Office sent up a plane to check the dust levels in the sky, there was no dust there. The dust levels were safe. There was no evidence of any concentration of black ash. So the airport had been closed for no reason. And the British Airways chief, gentleman by the name of William Walsh, he said, he reported, and it was published in the Daily Mail, May 18th, 2010. He reported, "I am very concerned that we have decisions on the closing of airports based on a theoretical model." And boy, that was, that had tremendous consequences in the traveling public. And that decision had actually been based solely in modeling with no measurements taken at all. So it was a great warning, be very careful with models. Make sure you've got measurements to support them, because otherwise the models can be misleading and can lead us astray.
Absolutely. It just doubles the careful nature that we need to have with measurements and have measurement supported models when we're making decisions. I'd like to move on here. You're definitely a great mentor to many. Your students call you the chief. And do you have any particular moments that you can recall which represents all the years that you have devoted to educating the next generation of engineers?
Well, I tell you, Paul, it has been a great career, no question. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm reminded of a story about my daughter, Helen. My daughter, Helen, when she was still in junior high school, the teacher went round the class and was asking the different students, "What does your father work at?" And when she got to Helen, Helen said something that I've never forgotten. And they say professors are absent-minded, and I would agree with that, at least for myself. I don't have a really good memory, but I do remember this. Helen's reply when asked, "What does your father work at?" Helen's reply was, "My father doesn't work. He's a professor, and he just talks." And I've thought a lot about that. And I thought, that's right. I really don't work because I enjoy what I'm doing. When you enjoy what you're doing, it's not really work. The people that are doing the work are the students. The students have to take exams, they have to study, they have to do research, they prepare papers, they write thesis. The students do the work. And I've benefited from all of the enjoyment and the fun too, that comes with working with students. And when I say that, I'm reminded of the fact that back at the time when I got that AISI Distinguished Professorship appointment back in the 1980s, early 80s, the graduate students did a great thing. They built a steel podium, a full-size podium, equipped with two handcuffs, a handcuff at each side of the podium, if you can imagine it. And on the platform of the podium, the actual podium where you would lay your papers, they had imprinted on that by welding metal the title AISI Distinguished Professorship, you know. But the idea of the two handcuffs was to keep me locked at the podium so I didn't drift away and go off on trips and visits. And a year or two later, they carried that even further on a dinner, a student banquet, a student dinner, annual dinner. They presented me with a ball and chain. Again, they had made it in our foundry. And boy, that steel ball, it was about 6 inches in diameter. I could hardly lift it. And it was attached to a chain, if you could picture it, the chain. And at the end of the other end of the chain, there was, excuse me, at the other end of the chain, it could lock onto my leg. So that's what they did at the banquet. They locked this chain onto my leg, and I had to hold and carry this ball as I moved around. And then towards the end of the banquet evening, they gave me a ring with about a couple of dozen keys on it, so I could unlock the padlock that had locked this thing around my ankle. Well, after I had tried about 3 or 4 or 5 keys, I thought, I'll bet the key that unlocks this padlock is not even among these keys they've given me. And I was right, it wasn't. But fortunately, they took pity on me and gave me the chain that allowed me to unlock the bangle thing around my ankle. And I was able to take the ball and chain off and carry it down into my car and put it into the trunk of the car. And I drove off. I was driving out along the main street by the university, did a left turn through a light, moving down through the street, and suddenly I see a flashing red light behind me. It's about 10:30 at night. A police car stops me. Policeman gets out, comes to the window. All I can see is the side of his gun looking through the window. He said, "Open the trunk of your car. You just went through a red light." I said, no, I didn't go through a red light. I said, I went into the middle of the intersection. The light was at green. I waited in people completing the crossing. And when they had completed the crossing, the light turned to red. I cleared the intersection. Out, he said, "Open your trunk." Oh, I thought, I've got that ball and chain in the trunk. If I open that and so I explained to him, I said, I've got a ball and chain. And I told him the story of the students, how they'd given me it and so on, and that I hadn't really escaped from prison. Opened the trunk, sure enough, there was the ball and chain. He said, "We just want to make sure there's no drugs there." And of course there wasn't. So I was okay, but can you imagine, Paul, what would have happened if I had still been wearing that ball and chain and he asked me to step out the car? He would probably have shot me, at least in the foot. So I was very thankful the students gave me that key that allowed me to unpadlock the padlock and travel without the ball and chain around my leg. So great memories when I think back of experiences with the students and my time teaching. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
You're definitely well loved by your students, and your students are humorous and definitely talented. So really good story. Thank you for sharing that. In your opinion, what is the core value of education?
Well, I tell you, Paul, it's, the university, we are in university, it's really a place, again, from your own experience, where knowledge is generated, hopefully validated, and certainly a place where we should communicate what we have found. So if you sum all of that up, it's really a place, it's a place for the transfer of knowledge between groups, between industry and academia, between different professors, between different schools. It's the core of education. is the transfer of knowledge. And when I think of that, I'm reminded of a good example of the influence of effective communication, say between a teacher and a student. And that example concerns Socrates. And as you know, Socrates was a great thinker, a great teacher, but he never wrote a book, never wrote a book. But his teachings and his philosophies were recorded by one of his own students, Plato. Plato recorded them. And then Plato, in turn, he went on to become a noted philosopher. And Plato established what we know as the world's first academy in Athens. And at that academy, at the age of 18, Aristotle joined the academy, and he studied under Plato. And then after leaving the academy, Aristotle was invited by Philip, the king of Macedonia, to tutor his young son. And the young son, we now remember, as Alexander the Great. So to me, this is a great example of teacher-student interactions and the chain of influence that extends from one generation to another, from Socrates to Plato, from Plato to Aristotle, and from Aristotle to Alexander the Great. It's a great example of effective communication.
So pass down of knowledge, being able to pass down true and important knowledge to the next generation.
Yeah.
That is fantastic. So you have been also a very active member in a number of professional societies. How did your involvement progress over the years?
Well, Bob Ward, if I go back to my time at McMaster, Bob Ward was the first person that introduced me to the Iron and Steel Society. And at that time, it was the Iron and Steel Division of the Metallurgical Society of AIME. It was a division of the METSOC of AIME. And I first attended conferences with Bob. And that got me started in these society meetings. And of course, within Canada, we have the CIM, Canadian Institute of Mining, Metallurgy and Petroleum, with the annual conference of metallurgists. And I think through these conferences, great benefits were obtained. You're meeting different people. You are interacting with folks with totally different backgrounds, folks from industry, folks from research departments. And over the years, as your involvement increases, and again, you've experienced this personally, Paul, you become involved in their committee structure. And serving in these committees, I always found was a great thing because they were very functional committees. These committees within societies existed for a purpose. And they always had very specific items of business that needed attendance. So it was never wasted time. In fact, you always felt that things were being achieved and things were accomplished. And over the years, I served in a number of capacities. And finally, for the Iron and Steel Society, I served as president in 1985. And of course, during that time, and the years on either side of it, I served in the AIME board and met people from the other societies, who are the societies that are members of AIME. And again, friendships are established, contacts are made, communication. It has been tremendously beneficial throughout my career. And I've always encouraged, as you know, Paul, encouraged their students to participate in the professional societies.
Fascinating contribution. And of course, in 1992, you were recognized by AIME with the Honorary membership, one of the Institute's highest honor to recognize the contributions you have made to the professional society. The citation of that recognition reads, an outstanding teacher in the iron and steel industry whose contributions to the Iron and Steel Society and the field of ferrous metallurgy have yielded significant benefits to practicing engineers and managers in the industry. What can you tell us about this?
Well, Paul, knowing that this has been done for AIME and being very appreciative of the fact that they kindly made me an honorary member back in 1992, I got my AIME medal out of the glass case that it's in here at home, and decided to wear it right at this point in time. So I'm now wearing my AIME medal. I hope you can see it there. It has been a great honor. It really has to have that recognition from AIME. What a wonderful establishment it is, and has existed so many years now, so many years, and influencing in so many ways, not only our profession, but the mining profession, the metallurgical profession, the petroleum profession. It's had a great influence on people. Personally, just being involved within the AIME, and of course specifically within the Iron and Steel Society, and now AIST, the opportunity to participate in short courses was a great help. These short courses were sometimes held at conferences, but sometimes they were standalone events held within specific company locations, certainly within the US and Canada, as well as some countries abroad. And this was, to me, these short courses for plant people involved in operations as well as research, it was a great chance to share experiences. I remember one particular course, an example of that. One particular course, I was talking about an experience I had had when I was visiting Hungary. And in Hungary, I visited a steel plant. And for the first time, I saw them monitoring the vibrations that are generated when gas is bubbled through molten steel contained in a ladle. Now, the bubbles rise up through the steel, as you well know, and send out vibrations. And these vibrations go right through the refractory to the steel shell. And the Hungarians were measuring that vibration. But in addition to that, they were also listening with a microphone and listening to the bubbles breaking the surface. Now, all of that, the vibration and the sound of the bubbles, is influenced by the surface tension of the steel, which in turn is influenced by the sulfur content. So when they were desulfurizing the steel by injecting desulfurizing agent with a carrier gas and listening to the bubbles, as the sulfur decreased, the surface tension increased, and the vibrations and the sound changed. And by monitoring the vibration with a monitor and listening to the sound, or doing either one, they could follow the desulfurization process. So monitoring with vibration as a control tool, to me, was fascinating. So I was telling this to the operators in this particular steel plant. And one person, an operator, he said, I do that where I work. And I said, what exactly do you do? Oh, I said, I'm in continuous casting. And I said, how do you use vibration there? Oh, I said, I use vibration to tell me when slag is coming through from the ladle and going into the tundish. And again, Paul, as you know, that's one of the things you want to avoid as much as possible, is slag carry over from the ladle into the furnace, into the tundish, which happens when the level of steel in the ladle is getting close to the bottom. He said, I put my foot on the stand that holds the tundish. And he said, the steel comes from the ladle through a submerged nozzle into the tundish. And he said, when the slag begins to come in instead of steel, it vibrates differently. And he said, if I've got my foot on the side of the tundish, I can feel it. And I know the slag is beginning to come over, and I stop the pour. Well, man, oh man, I'd never heard of that before. But there was an example of an operator. And when he told the story, there were other operators in the room, and they didn't know that story either. He'd never told anybody else about it. So maybe one or two people knew, but certainly there were a whole host of them didn't. So he was an example of where experience that's generated by the operator is often lost and not transmitted to other folks who might be able to make use of it in other locations. Now, today, we monitor vibrations in blast furnaces and ladles and BOFs and submerged entry nozzles, all kind of things. But at that time, it was a very unique kind of thing. And it was a lesson to me that if you can, get in touch and keep close contact with the operators on the shop floor, because they've developed a lot of experience and knowledge over years. And it's not necessarily published, and it's not always transmitted. So my message there, listen to the operators.
And that is another great example of how measurement is very, very important. You got to be able to measure, and then you can learn something from that measurement. And definitely, would you say that that because of your involvement with your professional membership, that has brought you to these particular experiences that you were able to learn and come back and share with the committee and with the professional society at large?
Absolutely, absolutely. There is no doubt in my mind, Paul, that through the society, without the society, I doubt very much if all of this would have happened. To me, the membership of the professional society has been an integral part of our research activities at Toronto, and of this whole business of knowledge exchange. And I use the word exchange, it's obviously two-way. It's not just the knowledge transfer from academia to industry, it's knowledge being transmitted from industry back to academia. So it really is an exchange. It's like a good telephone conversation. If only one person is talking and not listening to the other, it's really not communication. You know, it takes two to communicate. The whole idea of the word communication, and it's the same root that goes to the word communion and community. So it takes more than one person to be involved in it. And working through the society has been a great vehicle for communication.
And how do you see societies benefiting the people in the industry today?
Well, as I say, Paul, it's been a great opportunity, and is a great opportunity still for people in the industry to be involved, as I say, in committees, to establish new friendships, to perhaps meet with people that normally they wouldn't meet. They wouldn't be in the same room, you know, because they operate in different sectors. So by participating in these kind of activities, it sure opens up doorways and pathways for exchanging knowledge and communicating from one sector to the other. And I think anything that helps to do that is a good thing. And I cannot praise AIME and the various societies that have been involved in through that. It's been an excellent experience and a very profitable experience. And I would encourage people who are maybe coming into the industry today, make sure you get involved in a professional society.
Great. And if you were to recommend your member society that you have been actively involved in to a new graduate or present student going through an engineering program, what would you tell him or her about it?
Well, if they have the chance to do it at all, and of course, as members of our group at Toronto, you well know, Paul, a very important aspect of all of that was students spending time preparing presentations, preparing posters, writing up manuscripts for presentation at conferences and publication in journals, and the social events that are associated with these conferences, plant visits that are often associated with the conferences, potential contacts with possibly future employers. All of that comes about through attendance at these meetings and conferences. So to me, it was time very, very well spent when students were going through these kind of activities and then going on to visit and participate at society meetings. So I would always encourage your students, as soon as possible, take out student membership, become involved, because some of these committees involve student members as well. They look to have student members and getting them involved in their society activities. It's a great part of the learning experience, whether you're an undergraduate or a graduate student. It's a great part of the training program, and I have no doubt at all, subsequently has tremendous benefits on your professional experience and professional development.
I couldn't agree more. I think personally, having gone through and still actively involved in conferences and committee meetings, knowledge exchange and being able to meet people are definitely one of the most crucial parts in career development. So thank you for promoting that aspect. ISS Iron and Steel Society helped organize a McLean Symposium in recognition of your contribution, which was held in Toronto. Are there any particular moments from that event that you could share with us?
Yeah, that was a memorable time, I have to say, Paul. It was so very kind of Iron and Steel Society and the folks involved in that society. There was a group of about a dozen of them that formed a committee led by Alan Smiley, who used to be, of course, at AK Steel in years gone by. Alan Smiley did his doctorate with Harry Bell back in Glasgow, the same as I did, a few years after I did. It was a great time because people got together that I had known over the years. They came from a number of different countries to Toronto for that event, from Japan, from Mexico, France, USA, Canada, other places. It was a great gathering that we had together at Toronto, and papers were invited on various themes that reflected the kind of areas that I had been involved in with our research group over the years. And it was just a lovely gathering. And I remember thinking back, and this came as a total surprise to me, because at the banquet, I had decided I would wear my Highland dress outfit and have my kilt on and so on. And Betty, she was wearing her kilt. But what I did not expect, there were 11 other gentlemen attending that conference, and they had all went out and rented kilts, some of them for the very first time in Toronto, to wear them at the banquet. And some of these folks wearing kilts, they weren't all from Scotland. There were a few who were from Scotland, no doubt about it, originally, now lived in the US or Canada. But I remember very clearly there was a gentleman from Mexico, and there was another gentleman from France wearing the kilt. They had rented the Highland outfit. So I have some lovely photographs of these fine friends from different parts of the world, all attired in Highland dress, complete with sporn. So nothing but good memories and great appreciation for the good work of Alan Smiley and his committee that pulled that event together. It really was a wonderful time, I must say.
In 2013, among other key and important recognitions from ISS, CIM, and Royal Society of Canada, you received a Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal, and you were among the 5 recipients at the University of Toronto. Congratulations on this very rare honor. The Jubilee Medal recognizes Canadians who have made distinguished contributions to Canada. Your pioneering work on steel reoxidation reactions in all facets, including thermodynamics, kinetics, and fluid flow studies has a revolutionizing impact on industrial practices. What can you tell us about this particular experience?
Well, Paul, I've got here I hope you can maybe see it. The Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal. And of course, at this time, there's a lot of coverage in the news of the unfortunate passing of the Queen's husband, Prince Philip. So there's a lot of information with regard to the royal family in the media at the moment. And at the time when I received that particular medal, it came very much as a surprise, I must say, totally unanticipated. And as you had mentioned, the Royal Society had actually approached the University of Toronto to ask them to suggest some potential recipients, and the university selected 5 and very kindly included me as one of the 5 to receive that medal. And the medal was subsequently awarded at U of T by the president of the university there, and we had a family gathering, of course, a nice gathering of students from our department, yourself, Paul. It was a memorable time, and one that we certainly will not forget, and it was very much appreciated. Very kind of the folks involved.
And you're in your Highland outfit as well.
Yes, that's right. I was dressed in my Highland dress outfit again. That's right.
So that was fantastic. Good memories. Now that you're retired, what is keeping you occupied right now?
Well, I tell you what, I should have brought it in and held it up here in front of the screen. I have a cushion, and on that cushion it's imprinted, I'm sorry, I'm too busy. I'm retired, you know. But I thoroughly enjoy my retirement. I'm really enjoying it. I still have an office at the university. I don't do any teaching anymore. I still have some research funding from our Canadian government, from NSERC. And I have a senior research associate that you know well, Dr. Yindong Yang, following on the advice of, going back to the earlier part of our discussion, Professor Alcock, to have a good second in command. And Dr. Yindong Yang has been second in command with me for over 25 years now. He did his doctorate in Sweden before joining me in 1994. And he looks after our day-to-day activities in the laboratory. His background, of course, is from China, and he still has a position back at his home university there at the University of Science and Technology, Beijing. So he goes back to China generally a couple of times a year, not at the moment, of course, because of the COVID, but he generally goes back to China twice a year, visits various universities and institutes there, as well as steel companies in China. And because of that, we usually have a couple of people visiting doctorates who are taking their doctorates in China, universities in China, but they come over and spend a year with us and then go back again. And we also have people come over from steel companies. We had a group of 6 engineers, which was quite surprising. 6 engineers from Wuhan Steel, senior people, came over and spent a year with us, and then they went back to Wuhan. And then a second group of 6 engineers came over from Wuhan and spent a year with us. So none of that would have happened without the second in command, Dr. Yindong Yang. So all of that is good for our own undergraduate and graduate students, because we have undergraduate students do their bachelor's thesis with us. Generally 3 or 4 students a year do that. And we usually have maybe a couple of master's students doing a degree with us. But again, it's only possible because of Dr. Yang. Other activities I'm involved in, very enjoyable, I must say. I participate in the preparation of award nominations for different people, and also participate in a number of award committees for different institutions, societies. And that's a very pleasant and a pleasurable activity. I thoroughly enjoy doing that. Another thing I've got involved in the last 20 years or so since retiring is watercolor painting. I do some watercoloring. You remember I'd said to my dad, I'd like to do painting. Well, I don't actually paint walls. I still don't paint walls, but I'm doing watercolors. And I enjoy doing that. Some of my paintings involve metallurgical topics. Some are countryside scenes, and some involve people. So I'm involved in that. And of course, I spend a fair bit of time with the family. My son Tom and his wife Sharon have two grown-up children, or grandchildren, and our daughter Helen and her husband Les. They also have two children. So, and both sets of families only live about 40 minutes away from us. So we generally see them under normal circumstances every weekend or every second weekend. And then I obviously spend a lot more time now I'm retired with my chief executive officer and my chief financial officer, i.e. my wife, Betty. Our marriage will be celebrating our 60th anniversary this year. And I have to say, and you've met Betty Paul, so you know her well, without Betty's support down through all these years, back in Scotland, in Canada, the United States, back in Canada again, without her staunch support, none of the things that we've been talking about and described above, none of them would have been possible. She has really done so very, very much, particularly when I was very much involved in research activities at one point, more than I should have been. She held things together. So I'm very, very thankful to Betty. So all of that to say, I'm retired. I have a number of things going on. One of the things we're not doing at the moment is traveling, because we also like to travel and take cruises when we can. And at this time of year, we would normally have been in a repositioning cruise, sailing from Fort Lauderdale over to Southampton, and then spending 2 or 3 weeks up in Scotland before flying back again. But unfortunately, we haven't been in Scotland last year. I don't know whether we'll be in Scotland this year or not, but we're sure looking forward to it.
Well, congratulations to the 60th anniversary, the most important anniversary, and thanks to Betty. So even after retirement, you have continuing to contribute to the field that is meaningful to you. What has made working in this field so enjoyable, that made you still dedicated to working and contributing?
I think, Paul, it's interaction with people, and predominantly, again, as you would well know, predominantly the people that I interact with are the students. And of course, generally speaking, they're younger people, they're young people. And I have the impression, the feeling that working with young people is a great privilege. It helps to keep me young. At least it helps me, I think, to keep young. Obviously, over generations, young people's training changes. And now that I'm coming really towards the end of my involvement, I have another 2 or 3 years probably, and I'll finish with my grants that I'm holding at the moment. Younger professors, students need to benefit from younger professors rather than older professors. In fact, the university recognizes that, because if I was supervising a person like yourself now, a doctoral candidate, when you used to be a doctoral candidate, if I was supervising a doctoral candidate, I'm only allowed to co-supervise. I have to have a younger professor involved at the same time. And that to me makes a lot of good sense, because the younger professor brings in the younger ideas, and perhaps the older professor, he can contribute something just from his experience. But it's very important, I think, today that the younger people coming out now are exposed to younger professors rather than just folks that have been in the field for a long time. So all of that to say, working and being allowed to continue to work with young people, although I'm officially retired, has been a great privilege, and it's been very meaningful to work in that capacity within the field.
Well, thank you for your contribution. Before we conclude, do you have any advice that you would give to today's young leaders in the engineering profession?
I think, Paul, really thinking back on what we've talked about, I would say to young engineers who have just graduated, whether it's a bachelor's degree, or master's or doctorate, and moving into the production or industry, government, or even academia later, regardless of where we work, I think all of us, wherever we are, we have a great privilege of participating in what I would call the bridge building process. You know, in life, we're either doing, I think, one of two things. We're either building walls around us and shutting people out, or we're building bridges between people and helping to do things together. And we have to decide, what do we want to do? Are we building walls, or are we building bridges? And when I think of bridges, I'm thinking bridges of education that would enhance what we've talked about, knowledge exchange. Bridges of innovation that would have the potential to transfer industrial operations, like where you are at the moment, Paul. And then maybe most important of all, bridges of friendship. Bridges of friendship that facilitate communication. There's that word again. Communication between different cultures, whether it's industry, government, research, academia. The opportunity to build bridges. I think we have a great challenge, young people in front of us, to participate in the bridge building process.
And that just provides another great reason for us all to be involved in professional societies where we can build these bridges.
I think, Paul, following that on in these societies, building these bridges, I would give you a quote from, again, one that I have used a lot in my lectures over the years, a quote that comes from Alexander Graham Bell. And in a sense, it's Scottish propaganda. You know, I accept that. It's Scottish propaganda because Alexander Graham Bell was born in Scotland and came to Canada when he was in his early 20s with his parents, and lived just about 20 miles away from where I am at the moment in a small town called Brantford. And there, to this day, there is the Bell Homestead, which you can visit. And of course, it's now a museum. And Bell spent a number of years there before moving to Boston. And in Boston, he opened up a college for teachers who would be involved in training young people who were deaf how to speak. That was their challenge. And he himself, Alexander Graham Bell, while in Boston, and also when he came back for visits, as he did to his family here in Brantford, he began to investigate the same kind of thing, ways by which children who were deaf and couldn't speak, how they might learn to communicate. And it was through these experiments that he was doing to try to help deaf children speak that he came across the basis for his invention of the telephone. And in one of his talks to young people, and this has struck me very forcefully, one of his talks to young people, he said this, and it's quite a big quote, so bear with me. He said, Alexander Graham Bell, "We're all too much inclined, I think, to walk through life with our eyes closed. There are things around us and right at our very feet that we have never seen because we have never really looked. We should not keep forever on the public road, going only where others have gone. We should leave the beaten track occasionally and enter the woods. Every time you do that, you will be certain to find something that you have never seen before. Of course, it will be a little thing, but do not ignore it. Follow it up. Explore all round it. One discovery will lead to another. And before you know it, you will have something worth thinking about to occupy your mind. For all really big discoveries are the results of thought. And to me, there's so much truth and so much to be learned from Bell's philosophy. And for young people particularly, it represents great advice.
What a great quote for our young leaders today. I'm sure we can all look around and find details that are worth investigating and learn from. Is there anything else you would like to say in closing?
I think, Paul, at first, let me say thank you for guiding and preparing and taking me through this interview session. I appreciate it very much, Paul. It was a delight to have you do this, particularly because you were not only an undergraduate student at Toronto, you were a master's student and a doctoral candidate in my research group, published award-winning papers, participated in many of the things that we've talked about here. And I can't think of a person I would have preferred more than yourself to participate in this activity. Thank you so much, Paul. And I would close just with a comment from Malcolm Muggeridge. Malcolm Muggeridge was a noted British writer and philosopher. And in a lecture that he presented at the University of Toronto back in the early 70s, shortly after I had joined the department there in 1970. I think it might have been about 1973 or so, but certainly in the early 70s, Malcolm Muggeridge came to Toronto and presented a lecture in Convocation Hall, a place that you know well, Paul. And he shared this thought, this experience with the audience. And I'm not sure I've got it word perfect, but I've remembered it, and it was words to this effect. He said, when I was a young man, there were some things that were for me very important. Well, there were other things that did not matter much at all. He went on to say, now that I am in my senior years, those things that used to be so important to me do not matter anymore. And the things I did not consider worth bothering about have become the most important things of all. Words to ponder, words full of significance and full of meaning. Thank you, Paul.
It has been a great privilege to spend this time with you. And thank you very much for sharing your fascinating career and life. And of course, all the philosophical lessons that you have shared with us today. Thank you so much again for your willingness to share your story with the AIME.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.